Hey guys, welcome to the Model Citizen Podcast. We're your hosts, Hunter
and Michaela.
We are so excited to have you here. All right, let's dive in.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. How
It's
are
off the polls we go.
It's off to the polls we go. We're recording this on Election Day. Why did we do this to ourselves?
Why did we do this to ourselves?
Happy Election Day, guys. We are recording this on November 5th on Election Day during one of the most tense elections probably of our lifetime. Now, why did we decide to do an episode today? I don't know.
We'll never know. We'll never know. And honestly, by the time this comes out, we will know who won. I'm in Spain. So
you're literally in Spain.
I'm in España.
You've been to Spain. You came back already. If you're listening,
it was
to this,
amazing.
How was
I had
it?
so much fun. I can't believe that they crowned me Queen of Spain. This is nuts.
That was insane, dude. Right off the heels of the election, to be crowned the Queen of Spain is insane.
To not only like uplift democracy, but to also at the same token in Europe to be uplifting the monarchy is just a really interesting dichotomy. And listen, women hold many different spaces. Yep. We are multifaceted. We can be presidents and we can be queens.
That's just true.
And I've always said that. Now, it's very interesting that on the heels of us having and electing our first female woman president, we have our first male guest on the podcast. Oh, did you even think about that?
My God, wait.
This is our
first meal. Well, okay, but our husbands don't count.
Aside from our husbands, it's our because they're less a guest and more of like our
family.
They're our family, so like they don't necessarily count. Yeah, so our first like male who isn't our husband guest.
That's wild. That's wild. We have to ask him how he feels about that.
I know, it's a very
I'm very excited to chat with him, and we'll get into who he is in a moment. Dude, does my face look snatched or what?
Yeah, it looks very snatched. What are you doing?
No, you know what I'm doing.
I know, but tell the people what you're doing.
Guys, I am swearing by this product. Okay, so Katie Storino is the one who got me onto it. It's called Zip Halo. This is not sponsored. Honestly, it's an expensive product. It is like, I don't even know how much it is, like maybe $220 or something for this like this gadget. It's called the Zip, and it's like a microcurrent, and it basically like so when I do like an event, like a red carpet, I'll do like a microcurrent, and it basically like lifts everything up, like truly snatches the cheekbones, the jawline, and everything. So this is like that, but at home. And I was a skeptic at first. I saw Katie post about it like for months and months and months, and I was always like, okay. And then I saw her in person, and I was like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
And she was like, dude, it's the Zip Halo and with the LED higher dose mask. It's the 1-2 punch. And I was like, well, great. Now I have to try for myself. And now I'm literally singing it from the rooftops. Like, I am so sorry, but like,
no, it's so snatched. It's actually crazy. You jumped on and I was like, literally it's all cheekbone. Look at the cheekbones.
Look at the cheek and look at the jaw.
The jaw is jutting.
It is. The jaw is jutting. The cheeks are cheekers.
And I did borrow it when I was there. I used it a couple times, and that shit does work in the sense that you feel it working. Like literally, it was like my eye was twitching once it got up to it, and that's how you know that shit's working.
That's how I
like
want everything.
It's manipulating cellulose within the face and skin. It is pretty amazing.
I love it. And I think it's worth every freaking penny. And you guys, if you do want one, I do have a code. You can message me. I think it's 10% off. But anyways, DM me if you want one.
I'm going to be using that code, which is the funny thing here.
Yeah. But anywho, I am so excited for our guest today, you guys. I want to clarify how you say, do you think it's Baratz?
It's Todd Baratz, yeah.
Baratz.
And I know that because I spent the weekend reading his book, actually.
Yeah.
And So he released a book, it's called How to Love Someone Without Losing Your Mind,
which is a
and
brilliant,
it's such a good
brilliant
title. It
title.
really is, and also, like, I it's so funny because 'cause I'm probably gonna mention this when we talk to him, but, like, I feel very much like I know him so much now that it's, like,
Yeah.
almost like, when, back when you were going on dates and you would, like, look them up online and you'd find out everything about them, and then you were
Yes.
like, "Wait, I literally know, like, where you were 4th of July in
Yes.
2014." You know what I mean? And you're
But
just like,
also
you
I feel
feel
like people
weird.
say that when they meet us. They'll be like, "Wait, I already
Yeah.
know, like, I'm part of the." And the
Yes,
thing is,
for
yeah, you
sure.
guys are part of the family. Like,
Well,
we
that's
know
for
Todd
damn
Baratz.
sure. We know him, and
We've known him.
we've honestly known him. Um, and again, I'll probably mention this, but I love how he's so open in it. Like, he's so, um is, like, just so, and it's also, like, not a therapist jargon. Like, he just speaks like you're
Right.
talking to a person, which is, like,
A concept.
as somebody who has read so many recommended self-help books, it's so nice to hear somebody just say, like, "Oh, like, you just want someone to fuck you," or whatever, like, it's just,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
not like, he doesn't dance around, there's, like, no bullshit with it, um, and I really appreciate that, and it just is such a modern take on how to have, like, healthy relationships, and
Yeah.
I'm really excited to have him on, I think he's
Me too.
fantastic.
To give you guys a little bit of a background, Todd Baratz is a licensed mental health counselor. So he's a certified sex therapist and he's based in New York. His focus is really on modern relationship dynamics and sexual health. So his work really blends that psychology and sex therapy and personal growth that really just helps individuals and couples navigate intimacy and conflict, personal transformation. And like Michaela mentioned, he's the author of How to Love Someone Without Losing Your Mind. And he also hosts a podcast called Our Diagnonsense. Brilliant name.
Great
Brilliant names.
name. Great name.
And you know what? His expertise has made him a sought after voice on issues of sex, love, relationship healing, and contemporary life. And I know that he started his platform in 2021 and it actually went viral. And that's kind of how he got his jump start into it. And we're super excited to have him on the pod. And we have questions that we personally want to ask him. And then, of course, we're going to ask him some questions that we got from you guys as well. And we're going to dive in. Again, this series is pretty much probably, we can with certainty say it's not safe for work. So
Yeah.
this is one of those episodes you don't want to listen to with
Not
your
safe for, like, the
kids.
toddlers in the car, and I feel
You know, I've
s
had some people say, like, "Oh, I put it on when I'm, like, doing the dishes or making dinner for the
yes,
kids," whatever. Like,
yes.
this episode is not that
Mhm.
episode, I fear.
Absolutely, absolutely. Alright, guys, let's let him in and let's chat. Here is Todd Baratz. We're, like, the non-problematic over here. We're just like, I know where everyone stands.
I mean,
So, at
basically,
least there's
we're just
that.
kind of holding on for dear life.
I know.
Exactly, exactly. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and
Yeah, thanks
chatting
for
with
having
us.
me.
We're so excited to chat with you. We found you a while ago. Kayla was actually just talking about how she spent the weekend reading your book.
Oh, thanks.
She did.
I'll let you kinda dive in, Kayla, of what you said because I think that
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, so
your
yeah,
approach is really
I spent it, so I'm married, and I still found so much, like, first of all, I'm giving this to all my single friends. This book is gonna
Yay.
go in everyone's stocking who's single, but
Right.
even being married, I felt like it really just had such a, there was so much information, so much knowledge in it, and it made me step back and be like, "Oh, wow, like, there is so much to learn from this book even as a married
Yeah,
woman."
it's for single people. It's for
Um
people in relationships. It's for
yeah.
people who don't want
Yeah, absolutely.
relationships.
Like, nurturing the
It's for
relationship you already
people.
have, and, what I was just saying is that, it's such, like, a modern, and I read a lot of self-help books that are recommended to me, and a lot of times it's very therapy jargony, and I'm kinda like, "Wait, what?" But then reading your book, it was like, and sometimes you just wanna, like, fuck somebody, and I was like, "Wow, it's so refreshing to hear somebody, like, speak like I'm talking to a human being," and
Well,
not,
good.
like,
I'm glad. I'm glad you liked it.
the therapy
Um,
stuff, so
Todd, you first of all, you're a Virgo,
That I am.
perfectionist, high
Mhm.
standards, all the things, hardworking,
Yes.
helpful. You also grew up in a dysfunctional Jewish family with a disabled father.
Yeah.
And how did you get into this work? Was this like something that you always sought out to do? Was it something that you had in your family lineage? How did you
No.
get into this? work?
No, I mean, growing up, my family had a family business. It was real estate. It was that or nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my parents really didn't even encourage me to go to college. I got into this purely just it wasn't like I was 10. I was like, when I grow up, I want to be a therapist.
Right.
I was
Every
just
10-year-old's dream.
nuts and like really, really struggled. And my family was crazy. And I went to therapy at a very early age. And it was a really positive experience. I talked to so many people who were like, yeah, my parents sent me and it was awful and I'm never going again. That wasn't my
Yeah.
experience. My family was nuts and horrible, but they did send me to therapy and it was really life changing and actually life saving. So, um, and I still see the same therapist that I started seeing when I was 15. So,
That's amazing.
yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
And so it's really my own personal experience that led me to want to work with other people and their experiences. So it was first, this kind of personal, emotional necessity that grew into an interest, that grew into an own intellectual interest. That then one day I realized that, oh, people do this for work. Like I could actually do this. And then
Yeah.
so on and so on. But it came from a
I
very
think
personal place.
right. I think one of the interesting things that you said in your book is that when people talk to you, your sex therapist, they think it's going to be like, oh my gosh, you're hearing about all this like kinky stuff and all this crazy stuff. But really, it's a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
That's like what a lot of like the basis of, I don't want to call it dysfunction, but like sexual health issues, maybe.
Yeah.
Can you speak on that a little bit? Like where do like so you that's probably the brunt of what you experienced, right? Is like people's
Yeah,
anxieties
people
that lead
often
to
think I'm
these
just
issues.
talking about like clits and dicks and holes, and then it's really just a lot of relational anxiety. And it's
Right.
actually rare that people are coming to me specifically with one issue that's just about the way their body is functioning sexually. It's
Mhm.
usually, this whole framework that's very relationally centric, that's full of anxiety, fear of rejection, shame of preferences. Um, so, I mean, obviously I talk about sex
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but usually it's a lot of relational and psychological dynamics that are underneath
Right.
sexual experiences that we often don't see because culturally we're told that sex is just about fucking or it's just about a body part or it just should naturally happen. That's not a thing.
Right.
So we don't often think about sex as being anything beyond just sex, but it's about much more. So everyone that I see people that aren't even coming to me for sexual issues.
Right.
Right.
Mostly everything is about relational anxiety, some form of trauma that
It's
has created some kind of relational
yeah.
anxiety, whether they're conscious of it or
It's
not.
Right.
I think it's interesting because, like, we live in such an interesting society in the way of, like, everything is sexualized, and yet
Everything.
we don't talk about sex, and we're
And
so afraid of it, and, like,
yeah,
I mean, my whole platform is, like, being open with my body. I mean, I'm the very first time I was in Sports Illustrated, I was completely naked with nothing but body paint on at, like,
so
21
cool.
years old. Yeah, but, like, I literally but I even doing that when I first started out, God, 10 years ago, I was, like, so nervous to, like, talk about that, and now I'm like, "Here I am, here's my like, I just don't care, and I think that, like, the more we talk about it, the more we kinda disarm this and say, "Hey, there's so much more to this, and it's not a scary thing, it's not a shameful thing." Um, and like you said, it's that twining of relationship and maybe trauma and stuff that kind of is like the root and the underneath part of it. What do you find is like the top 3 reasons that couples come to you? And is it mainly couples or is it individual?
Well, the reasons I see couples and individuals, the reasons why people come to see me are usually not the reasons they're really coming to see me. Usually it's like
Mm.
we
Right.
struggle with communication is the biggest issue or
Yeah.
differing levels of desire. But eh, the communication thing's a big one. Everyone's like, we don't know how to communicate. I'm like, no one knows how to communicate. It's okay. It's fine.
Yeah.
But
Right.
Right.
the real issue that most couples, I'm including myself, every single couple has, is there's a dynamic, and there's a dynamic in the relationship that doesn't work. And it's usually
Mhm.
rooted in some earlier attachment, childhood issues, issues related to gender identity, issues related to sexuality, and issues related to race, issues related to one's entire being that they're enacting with their partner and the other partner is enacting with them that creates a feedback loop that's really unsatisfying. Where one
Right.
person feels
Mm.
hurt or ignored or dismissed or invalidated or fill in whatever blank. And then it gets manifested through communication issues, sexual issues, whatever issues, but it's usually some kind of a dance that a couple does that's really unsatisfying, that's rooted in these earlier dynamics.
Right.
They
Right.
don't know
Yeah.
that
I think
yet, although
right. If
some
you're the
do.
one that yeah.
But
Yeah.
oftentimes that's really kind of the core of what's happening.
Right. I found that with therapy. I've been going to therapy for, like, very religiously now for the last, I'd say, year and a half.
Yay.
And I feel like every time it's something, she's like, "Well, now let's talk about, like, your childhood and going back to that." And I'm just like, "Wait, but how does that have anything to," and then lo and behold, it has
Yeah.
so much to do with it. And, like,
Yeah.
the way that I communicated with my parents and the way my parents communicated with me and, like, all of that, I just think that, people definitely don't, they just don't think it goes that far back, you know? They
No.
think it's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, it was, like, one simple thing," but it's like, no, it goes literally so far back, and you can pinpoint sometimes
Yeah.
behaviors that you learned and that you picked up from people around you.
I think, like, being rooted in so much
So
one of
much.
my good girlfriends, I told her we were talking today, and she was like, "Ask him." She was like, "I have a lot of father issues, and I don't know it." She cries a lot during sex when they're face to face, like, when it is, like, that intimate, true, like, that, like, really connecting sex, and she thinks it's because of that, like, maybe longing for connection, and I was like, "I'll ask him,
Mhm.
his thoughts," and then as we were asking people on our DMs, I got multiple of those.
The
I'm
crying during
curious if
sex
that is
thing.
some crying
Yeah.
during sex, yeah, and just but particularly during that, listen, for me personally, when my husband's on top, face to face, that's a lot more, like, loving and connected and emotional than it is if he's behind me, right? Like, I'm looking in your eyes, it's the whole
Sure.
thing, and so I think it's particularly in that moment, and she's always wanted to ask this, and then I was like, "But dude, I've gotten multiple DMs about this as well." So I'm
Mm.
curious to see if that's something you've heard before, if, there's any insight to that?
Yeah, I've heard this before. I mean, oftentimes people ask questions like that. I do this or they do this. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And it could mean a million things.
Yeah.
Something very specific for each person. But
Right.
clearly, it brings out some kind of emotional reaction
Yeah.
that is confusing and I would imagine brings up anxiety and really potentially challenging things during sex.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
go
It's
with
like
that.
that fear almost to connect, right? And I think that that's so much that, um, her and I were talking about that, how it's like she has possibly that fear to connect because of maybe something her father did when, she was younger, leaving and stuff like that. And, it just goes to show that is one of those instances where it's like that goes so far back that has now then shown up in these instances, in these
Yeah, I mean,
relationships during
when it
sex.
comes to these questions, I just have like 1,000 questions to ask because it's like, okay,
Yeah, of
so
course.
Like
if you're
follow-up
crying,
questions.
does that take you out of the moment? Does that, have no
Yeah.
impact on the pleasure? Does your partner know? Do you stop? Do you pause?
Right.
Is it painful? I want to know what exactly is happening in those moments.
Right.
What
Right.
comes up?
Yeah.
If there's
Right.
any sort of awareness, it sounds like she has some kind of hypothesis that it's connected to these earlier issues with her father. And then
Yeah.
what are those issues and why are they being manifested with this partner during a more intimate, more emotionally connected experience?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is what she's asking, but
Yep.
I,
Totally.
there's
There's
so
so
many
much.
questions here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like she needs to go to therapy maybe.
Well,
Like, as if we
she
haven't been
start
telling her for literally years to go to therapy.
No,
no, she started therapy. I also, Todd, I'm gonna send her to you because I feel like you would love her and connect with her. And
bet.
um, I also want to know, um, God, there's so much that I want to. I love that you say that everyone is a little unhealthy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wait, I have an idea though. I want to go back for 1 second.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go
The
back.
crying thing. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
know what her story is, but clearly there is some kind of outpouring of emotion. I would imagine it's
Yeah.
positive tears of maybe joy or just tears that are like, this is a really sweet moment, not like I'm so
Yeah.
Yeah.
sad. But
Yeah.
sometimes when sex, as we've said, is about so much more. And so sometimes when we're
Yeah.
tended to sexually, when we're taken care of sexually, it can feel more so much more encompassing than like something non-sexual. When we have someone
Yeah.
tending to our bodies
That
and our
is
mind
Yes.
and our
yeah.
soul and our spirit and our clits and our dicks and our holes and literally holding us
Yeah.
tight and feeling our bodies press, it can elicit a sense of being taken care of, a sense of being tended to. And
I think
That
that's a
actually
nail on the
that
freaking
actually
head.
rings pretty
yeah,
true.
and so like
Yeah,
if
I
this
think
is
that that's
something that
it.
she yearned for from her father, receiving that kind of care, receiving that kind of attention could just be so intense and so overwhelming. Not necessarily in a
Yeah.
negative way, but just overwhelming that it leads to
Yeah.
tears.
Yeah.
So just
That
wanted to
is such an
throw that out there.
interesting way to put it and so rings true to this person.
Yeah.
Her father's the only living, person in her life, as far as, like, a parental figure, and he is not really in her life, and that I've always tried to think of something I could explain to her that would make her feel, like there's an answer for that, because she just
Yeah.
recently went to has started therapy very recently, even though she's needed it for a while, but, she has, and I think that that is such a poignant way because it's so dead on. It
Yeah.
is that, like, feeling of caring, and I think that also goes back to the stigma around sex, where it's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I it's sex is equals fucking,
Yeah.
and that's it." And it's like,
Mhm.
well, there's also a lot of, like, needs in that,
Yeah.
that can be fulfilled. And so that's a really interesting way to look for I can't wait for her to listen to this episode. She's gonna
Yeah.
absolutely love it.
Just gonna
Not her getting free therapy advice.
There
Yeah,
you go.
fuck no, we're gonna send her there. But no, back to kind of what Hunter was saying about this was like one of my favorite quotes is that everyone's a little unhealthy.
Yeah.
And I feel like we all strive to be like our best, healthiest versions of ourselves, obviously. But we've all done things as humans. And I think there's probably not a lot of enough conversation about the fact that we all can have unhealthy moments where we like say something that we didn't mean or we do something that's not fair. I think that reading that, I was like, "Oh my god, finally someone fucking is not being like, you have to be so perfect in a relationship and you have to be the most perfect partner all the time and you cannot mess up and you cannot fuck up." All of that. It was just so nice to hear someone say like, "No, like we're all unhealthy. Like we all have weird coping mechanisms. We all have history. We all have all this stuff." So, I just thought that that was so interesting and like freeing to hear. Yeah.
But it's also, like,
Yeah.
kind of ridiculous. I mean, the standards for what it means to be healthy these days is like science
Yeah.
fiction. There's no
Right.
possible way in which we can fulfill any of that idealistic shit that's on social media and off social media and in culture that we've internalized and hold ourselves up to these standards. When the reality is that we're human beings, we're imperfect. We
Yeah.
cannot be our best self, whatever that means, all the time. We're emotional
Right.
people, and our emotions can be really, really intense and can make us become really, really reactive or withdrawn or upset, and then our behavior can follow. So I think we all put a lot of pressure on ourselves to
Yeah.
be perfect, even though we all know it's not possible. But we're so imperfect, we're so fundamentally flawed, and some of
Yeah.
those flaws
Mhm.
aren't the healthiest thing. I'm not saying that people should be running towards things that are self-destructive by any means.
Yeah, of
But it is
course.
just to say that, like, we're human beings, and there has to be some level of acceptance of that humanity, that imperfection, that pain that sometimes we can cause ourselves.
I think that it it, it disarms a lot, right? Like, and it kinda gives you that breath of fresh air, especially, we have, like, a 98% female listenership and,
Yay.
a lot of single women who are dating and who are having that hard time finding someone. And I think that because of social media, everyone has this list, right? And if you don't meet that list, if you don't meet that criteria, you and all your friends are like, but he didn't, he's not 6'4" and he doesn't have whatever it is.
Wish I was
Hearing
6'4".
this is that like, oh, you know, okay, this is okay. It's okay. It's the same thing with mental health, right? How we destigmatize, say it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to be a little bit unhealthy because we're all fucking a little bit unhealthy.
Yeah.
Mm,
And I think I've never really heard that when it comes into this space. It's always like, well, you have to do this. You have to try to climb up and be this person, perfect partner and this perfect person. When in reality, like the world is just so fucking different these days. Like it really
It's
is.
so hard, and it's set
If
up totally against
yeah,
us.
it
it's so
is.
true. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really, really is. What is a misunderstanding that you wish you could clear up when it comes to relationships and people, with their partners?
I mean, there's so many. I mean, the biggest
Yeah.
one, and I'm including myself in this, is the idea that it's our partner that needs to change.
Yeah.
That
Mm,
it's somebody
Right.
mhm,
else.
mhm,
And that's not to
mhm.
discount the fact that they may really fucking need to change. But
Yeah.
it's to say
Yeah.
that the
Yeah.
most important change that we should be seeking is within ourselves, regardless of the
Yeah.
Right.
dynamic. Um,
Right.
Mm,
I don't know if that's
that's
a
good.
misperception, but it's a problem in relationships. It's a problem that I
Right.
think
It
we
is.
all struggle with at one time or another, or on an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you find that
Personal.
a lot of do you find that it's pretty often you'll have someone come in who's like, "It's definitely my partner," and then they realize, "Oh, I should probably take some accountability for XYZ."
Well, yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
Right.
and some people are able and have that capacity to self-reflect, identify their role, and shift, and some people simply don't,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
which is sad. But some people are very limited. The most common thing I see in couples, it's their fault. Here's my partner, now change them.
I feel like that's probably the main thing that brings couples to you, right? It's like, because of course it's easier than to look inward and say, what can I fix, and what traumas am I bringing in, and whatever.
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
the
Like, who
reality
wants to
is,
sign up and be like, "Oh, this is all my fault and these are all my traumas?" Like, that's such a scary thing. It's so much easier to be like, "Well, you address your stuff
yeah.
maybe and you
yeah,
It
change,"
is
you
scary,
know?
but I
yeah.
don't think that anyone can actually be in a mature adult relationship if they're not willing to do that.
Absolutely.
I Did you hear that, ladies? Did you
And
hear
gentlemen.
that? It's like humble thyself, right? Let's take it back a moment, throw away the list, throw away all that, and just
Mhm.
like really look at the person. How do you find yourself? Always curious about this, right? Because they say like mediums can't read themselves or psychics can't read themselves, and like therapists can't diagnose themselves. Like, how do you yourself, Todd, find dating is? I don't know if you have a partner or not. Um, but like, do you find that you can come in and really utilize all that you teach people, and come into a relationship? Do you find that you are easier on your partner because of all that you know and all that you talk about, or harder?
Well, I was single for a very long time after I got out of my relationship. And I'm in a relationship now. It's been almost a year. Um,
Amazing, we love it.
Mhm.
and it's mixed.
Yeah,
Um, in terms of the taking responsibility part, I think I'm an angel and I can do no wrong.
yeah,
Of course. And
Uh,
yes.
but in terms of, being able to play the role of therapist and impacting my relationship in that kind of way, that's hard because,
Yeah,
it can be difficult to be on the receiving end of that. Um,
yeah,
and I think it takes a very strong person to be willing to allow that type of influence.
yeah.
Strong person, that sounds not what I want to do.
What sign is your partner?
But he's a Leo.
oh, he's Leo.
You said he needed to be strong, and I knew immediately he was a Leo. Oh, fiery though, right?
No comment. Uh,
But
uh,
you're also fiery.
yeah.
So it's like you guys are just like a duo.
Yeah, more fire than fiery. Um,
Yeah.
but no, it's hard. I mean, it's hard because I have my own set of traumas and I am so easily triggered. And while I might
Yeah.
know that I'm triggered, uh, you know, I'm still feeling extremely powerful emotions and my body is going fucking nuts. So like
Mhm.
Yeah,
I'm having a meltdown and saying to myself, you're having a meltdown and this isn't, this is why, and I'm still having a meltdown. So it's like it
Yeah.
doesn't
right.
prevent me from being triggered or having emotions that get in the way of me getting what I want.
Of
Right.
course,
Which
of
is
course.
so
Because 'Cause you're only
annoying because
human,
I'm like,
right?
I know everything. Shouldn't I just be
No,
able
Yeah.
to
it's
feel
so
nothing?
annoying.
I know it
Yeah.
all. No, I
I
No,
know.
literally. Listen, we talk
You're
about
like,
this
you
all
know
the
the code, you
time.
know the cheat codes,
Yeah.
but yet still.
Yeah, my
It's the
body
same
You
just
reason.
goes, and I'm like, okay, here we
Yeah.
are. Again, I'm doing it.
It's the same way how, Michaela and I, our platform is really about like, I wouldn't say like, body positivity, but neutrality and just like being okay in your body and like whatever that looks like. Right. And people often think, well, you guys must never have a bad day. And I'm like, you, just because we're out here putting our whole pussy into it doesn't mean we don't have those days where we just
Yeah,
feel like shit.
absolutely.
Right. And I think that it's like so important. And this is why that authenticity, and I love your page because you are so authentic and open about it, is so important because, it kind of like the next generation is watching us, right? And I hope
Mhm.
to God that they are more open and more honest with how they feel, what they want, all the above. Um, I really think, yeah, what you're doing is so brilliant.
Thanks.
We have some questions from some followers. There's some of
Yeah.
them are spicy.
Let's hear them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I gotta say, I
Um,
think I don't know about you, Hunter, but I found that the number one question that my followers had for you was, what do you recommend for partners who have different sex drives?
mhm.
Yeah, that's one of the most triggering things for, for a relationship because, as we were
Right?
saying before, sex isn't just about fucking and an orgasm. For some people,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
really about feeling loved, feeling an intense
Mhm.
Yeah.
version of attention. Especially, life
Yeah.
is fucking nuts and everyone is super busy and crazy. And sometimes the ability for couples to sit and just be with each other and feel that and feel seen and feel felt and blah, blah, blah is, there's a small window for that. So during sex,
Yeah.
oftentimes people feel really connected, and
Yeah.
it's a real deep connection and super vulnerable and emotional. And so when there's differing levels of desire, the partner with the higher desire level can feel rejected, abandoned, neglected, unloved, disconnected in a chronic way. The challenge is that most people aren't talking about sex, um, even just sexual preferences. So they're certainly not talking about what happens when we have differing levels of desire. So the best
Right.
thing people can do is to really just to talk about it and to negotiate it,
Mhm.
Yeah.
which may feel counterintuitive and may oftentimes people go to, well, it's not sexy, and well, get over it.
Yeah.
If you want to have
Yeah.
sex and you want to be in a long-term relationship, desire is going to decline. It just is.
Yeah.
And so you have to do
Yeah.
things as a partnership to work on that, whether you have high desire or
Yeah.
low desire, if you want to be in a sexual relationship. And so if you want to be in a sexual relationship, you have to do things to prioritize sex and to prioritize the creation of desire. So
Yeah.
that means you have to talk about it, you have to plan around it, and you have to prioritize it if it's important to you. Um,
Right.
Right.
but the challenge is oftentimes there's one partner where it's important to them, and the other partner where they're like, I don't care. Which
Yeah.
who knows what's
Yeah.
going on behind that? Do they really not care? Are they emotionally repressed? What's happening? So it's a really complex issue, but
Yeah.
what's worse is
Yeah.
avoiding it.
Would you
So
say,
that's what most people do. So don't
I feel
avoid
like
it.
that is
Talk
a
about
very common thread with couples, especially married couples or
it. Yeah.
couples with children, right? Like that is one thing I really had to prioritize after having 2 children was my husband has the libido of a 15-year-old boy,
Mhm.
and I understood that when I married him, right? And so it was finding for us, it was that communication of, hey, it maybe can't be every single day like it was before, but like that is his love language is that like touch and that feel. And I think, and I don't know how you feel about love languages, if you believe in it, if
They're
you,
a great
think
metaphor.
it's something that is,
Use it.
yeah. So for me, it's like affirmations. His is feel and touch and all that. And you have to fucking work at it. And it's hard because sometimes you're like, you know what? I'm exhausted. I don't want to have to do this. But, it's like you mentioned earlier, it's not all about you, right? In a
Yeah.
relationship. It's not, of course, there is those, you have to, you want that pleasure as well, but also you have to give that other person. I don't know if you agree with that. Of like, yeah, you have to fill their cup up too if you want this relationship to work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And talk about it, right? Like, it might be an uncomfortable such a conversation, but it's either that or you don't have any sex and then the relationship falters,
Yeah, it's much
right?
harder to avoid these conversations than it is to simply just have them, because then it turns into
Yeah.
resentment and passive aggressivity or whatever, distance, and
Yeah.
withholding, and it's just bad news. But the other thing that I'll say is that a lot of couples are, it's either fucking or nothing.
Yeah.
And by that I mean penetration. And so I really
Yeah.
think centering penetration is the worst thing that can happen for a couple ever.
Yeah.
Because for some people, it's a lot of work to get fucked or to penetrate or whatever.
Yeah.
So it can be really helpful to be a bit more expansive with how we express ourselves sexually with a partner. So mutual masturbation is a great thing to do.
Yeah.
Also, both people don't need to get off. If there's a way in
Yeah.
which you can
Saved
join
me
in your partner,
postpartum.
yeah.
Couldn't do anything for 6
I
weeks, but
mean,
I was like, "I'm
mutual
here. I
masturbation can
can still."
sometimes be hotter than having penetrative sex. The problem is that we
Yeah.
all grow up learning
Agreed.
that penetration is
Yeah.
sex. And so if we're not
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
penetration, many people often don't even enjoy other types of sex. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
Yeah.
opportunity for couples to find workarounds and to actually stimulate desire by exploring their sexuality with each other, whether that's oral
Yeah.
or mutual masturbation or just even making out naked or massages or one
Yeah.
person gets the other person off or whatever. But there's
Right.
much more that people can do because sometimes penetrative sex is just exhausting and it's,
Yeah.
it's just, it's too much effort sometimes. Whereas just
Yeah.
lying there next to each other, masturbating can be
Yeah.
really relaxing and can be just as
Yeah.
connective.
We're big
Yeah.
proponents of also, like, utilizing toys, right? Like,
Toys.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, have fun with it. There's so much now that's on the market that's so great, and so accessible. I mean, if you're, like, new to it, I had a girl who was like, "I'm so nervous. I've never bought a vibrator." And I'm like, "Oh, your life's about to change."
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they,
Lucky.
ship in discreet packaging if you're not
Yeah.
open to, whatever. Amazon has them. Like, you can
Mhm.
really have fun, and I also think that it makes it more fun because it's like then you almost desire that sex more, I feel like, because you've explored and it's like this new it kinda like reignites those butterflies of like, "Ooh, this is something that, like, we've never done before." It's always been penetrative or whatever. It's that excitement back. Um,
Yeah.
I had, another question that we, had was I've been married for 15 years. We saved ourselves for marriage, but I've never had the big O with him. How do I approach him with this without bruising his ego?
Well, I mean, I'd be curious to know if they've orgasmed by themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
You
Good
know,
question.
there are
God,
many women
I hope.
who really
Yeah.
struggle to orgasm generally.
Yeah. Absolutely. Why
So
is that, do you think? Are we just not taught like the correct
Well, we're definitely not
why?
taught. It's not talked
no, I
about, like,
mean, it's
female
historical,
orgasms.
it's religious, it's
Mhm.
social.
Right. Is there a
Right.
way to do it? Like, does it matter if it bruises his ego? Is it kind of like it may, but it's more important that you have this conversation and maybe he has that moment of like, and then you guys can get over it together? Um, like, how do you feel about that? Like, is there a way to
Well, this is
avoid that
another way in which
bruising?
male pleasure in hetero relationships is centered. That
Yeah.
even in her inability to come during sex, she's more worried about bruising her partner's ego.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
amorphous, ambiguous thing that may or may not exist, than she is her own
Right.
Yeah.
pleasure. So,
Mm.
I think the conversation first has to start with herself in terms of how she understands her own pleasure in the face of her partnership.
Yeah.
Also, how does her
I also
partner
wonder
understand her pleasure?
yeah,
Um,
and I also wonder if
is
he
she
would be
faking
like,
it?
"Thank you for telling me
Right.
that."
Yeah. How is she
Yeah.
faking it?
I
That
just
was my
want to
big
know
question.
what's going on underneath there for her, and
Mhm.
then
Right.
working on getting her to prioritize herself more. I'd also imagine that this is
Right.
Yeah.
probably something that manifests non-sexually as well.
Yeah,
Mm.
she said because she had said that they've been married 15 years and they saved themselves, for marriage, and I almost feel like, I think
There's also, I would imagine, a
yeah,
lot of religious stuff happening there.
Yeah.
it for sure,
A
yeah.
lot of gender
I think
roles, a lot
that
of traditional values,
Yep.
and so
yeah,
on.
which can
Plays a
also be
huge part.
scary, if you're
Mhm.
so strapped to that, to then go off kilter a little and say,
Terrifying.
"Hey, I'm not," it is that like trauma of usually childhood and upbringing is the reason why you are, have so much of that rooted in you.
Mm.
Also, I think it could also go the other way where you don't bruise his ego and he says, "I can't believe I haven't. I'm so sorry. I want to pleasure you."
Sorry, New York is
She
so
says,
loud today.
no, it's
Can you hear that?
it's not you, it's New
Look at the
York. New York is
camera.
but here's the thing. Michaela and I go into New York and
Mm.
I used to live in the city in Columbus Circle and it was great. I had my like Carrie Bradshaw moment and I loved it. But then I leave New York and then I come back in and I'm like, it's a hellscape. And then I
It's a
leave and I'm like, I miss New York.
I
And then
know,
I'm like,
it's
it's a hellscape.
such a
Yeah.
masochistic
It's a
location.
masochistic relationship.
Yeah,
I completely understand it.
I love it.
My husband has completely stopped desiring sex. We're in such a dry spell. Help.
Mm. That sucks. It's actually very
Right.
common, and really
Yeah.
hard. And this is probably, I know people when they ask questions like this, they want like a step by step what to do, how to solve, how to fix. We need a third
Yeah.
party to help mediate these conversations because clearly, if they've not had sex for a long period of time, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. There's a lot of
Yeah.
bias, there's a lot of history, there's a lot of culture, there's just a lot of stuff. We may not even be able to think or see or feel because it's so unconscious and we may be so defended against facing whatever it is that's being manifested in a lack of sex.
Right.
So, I mean, a lot of people are not running to couples therapy, but I would say you need to get a therapist to work through this issue. There
Yeah.
are things that you can do that don't involve couples therapy, even though I think that's the number one option. Number two option would be
Yeah.
to take an online course together. There are plenty of courses. I have a course, practically every therapist
Oh,
that's a sex
do you?
therapist, yeah, has
Mm.
courses. You could even just Google getting back desire, I'm sure, and there's probably a gazillion courses. So
Okay.
I like to just to think of it as like learning how to play guitar. If you
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
learn something, if you want to make a change, you have to put effort into making that change. And so
Yeah.
oftentimes that effort is learning something new.
Mm.
Yeah.
So the question really is what prevents you from learning something new? What is the sexual fear? What's the relational fear that's preventing you from taking the steps that you probably know that you could take to work on
Yeah.
this issue?
Again, looking inward,
Yeah.
right? Looking at ourselves sometimes
Like
and
go to
saying like,
therapy,
"Hey,
read
it
a
might
book,
not
take a
be."
course. Like these are,
Yeah.
it's
Yes.
So
not
you
like
do offer a
there's a
course.
magic
That's
word.
amazing.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
practically every sex therapist I know does too. So like take mine,
Well,
take
we're gonna
someone
drive everyone to
else's.
your
Yes, go to
page.
mine.
Yeah.
But like even
Um,
just Googling, you can find
yeah.
things.
I also wonder if so this is I was actually talking to Kale about this a couple weeks ago because a lot of my friends, I don't know if you're seeing this, a lot of my friends who are single, this has happened probably to 5 different guys in the last year, have had low testosterone. Have
Hmm.
you been seeing this? I don't know what it is. I don't know if
I mean,
this is
it's a
like I'm like,
thing.
it
I
is
mean,
definitely
they
and
are
I'm
low
wondering
T
also
as reported by them to their partner as an explanation as to why they're not having sex, or like,
yeah.
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, so, like, that has been a common theme with, a few of my girlfriends, 3 in particular, with 5 different guys, and I'm also wondering if
and they
that
said
could
they go and they've
possibly
gotten their
be
testosterone
they've
levels
gotten
checked, and they're low,
tested.
and then they go on
Yeah.
Yep,
TRT, and then
medication. Mhm, and so I also
it's a thing.
wonder if maybe this could even be something that, if it's not that, desire, something to look into. I don't know,
It's
it's
all
very
something to
interesting.
look into.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because there's medication for it,
Yes.
and I think that that's I think that, there's also a misconception around, this entire industry is like, I also have a girlfriend who had dated a guy with herpes, right? And she was so misinformed on what that meant and
Everyone.
the medications around it. And I think that like this is all stuff that needs to be talked about. Like we just really don't. And then we're scared of so much when it comes to sex and
Yeah.
ourselves and our bodies and
The
other people.
stigmas. Mhm.
The stigmas around it. Um, and yeah, I think if the more of these conversations that we have and the work that you're doing and so many other incredible people are doing
And the
is
work that
just
you two
super
are
crucial.
doing.
Yeah, yeah, all of
Yeah.
us, right? It's
It's
like
about
that
putting it out there and, like,
collective.
It
yeah.
is a
And the
collective.
more we can all talk about it and, like, be open about it and be comfortable with it, like,
Yeah,
I just feel like that's really all it is just sitting and having these conversations. I mean, I've had uncomfortable conversations with my husband about things, and it, like, enlightened so much about him and me, and they can be uncomfortable, but, like, once you have them, it's amazing, like, the next level that gets unlocked with your partner
yeah,
when you're like, "Oh, wow, I never even thought about that." Like, for example, we talked about how, growing up we grew up in such an internet exposure to pornography that I don't think any other generation could really understand, like, and I think for him, he had this in his mind that he had to perform a certain way because that's what he had seen in porn growing up. And I told him, I was like, "Listen, I've had sex with more men than you have because you've had sex with quite 0 men.
That's
I know how they perform in bed. You don't know how y'all actually perform.
yeah,
That's not it. Like, what you're seeing on TV is not we even want. And
Yeah.
I explained to him what the female gaze is, and like how I personally found affection and got turned on. And I think
Yeah.
it just opened his mind to being like, oh my God, there's not like just one or two or three ways that, it was like
Yeah.
this fantasy was being portrayed in like
It's
pornography.
totally,
And
yeah.
we had this conversation, and it was enlightening for both of us, because I was like, oh my God, like you really
Yeah.
thought this whole time, that that's all that women needed or wanted, or you thought you had to perform like that? Like, what? Are you kidding me? These men are
Yeah.
like, this is not real. This isn't reality. Like, these guys are getting cuts in between their scenes where they can like go and like think about whatever they want that turns them on and gets them hard again. Like, it's not like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that I wish couples would have that conversation too, about
Yeah.
like what's reality and what's not when it comes to
Yeah. Do
sex.
you feel that too, Todd, um in uh in relationship and homosexual relationships, that it's the same thing of feeling like we have to perform, and we're
Mm.
seeing this? Because I have a lot of gay guy friends who they almost feel like the gaze is different. Not gaze, gay, G-A-Y, but G-A-Z-E, but also G-A-Y. The gaze is different for the gays, where it's like, a close friend of mine says, oh, a lot of guys think I want this big, beefy gym guy, when really my gaze is I want like the nerdy, um, gentle, soft spoken, kind of guy. And I think I always wonder, like, is it the same for you as well? Like, do you feel that there's this stress and this pressure to perform and be a certain type of way? Um, for the people you see in your own personal relationships.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of gender or sexuality, every single person has sexual fears, sexual anxiety, and performance anxiety. And oftentimes that's
Yeah.
based
Yeah.
on these unrealistic expectations of what sex should be, whether that's
Yeah.
based on, pounding and fucking and screaming, or lasting a certain
Yeah.
amount of time, or being able to come 10 times, or being able to
Yeah.
squirt, or whatever, or just
Yeah.
being able, or wanting it all the time, or whatever.
Yeah.
Everybody has a variety of sexual fears and unrealistic expectations and anxieties and
Yeah.
shame. It doesn't matter their age, it doesn't matter their orientation or gender. This is a
Yeah.
cultural issue. But of
Yeah.
course, everybody's identity will at times have specific pieces that are particularly more challenging, like we were talking about with the woman who couldn't orgasm in terms of female pleasure. So,
Yeah.
you know, still though, everyone has sexual fear and anxiety. We just can't
Right.
discount identity, but it's a common
Yeah.
thread for everyone.
Right.
Mm,
Right.
that's so
Oh
true.
my gosh. Well, Todd, you are a gem. Thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for being so open and honest, for creating a safe space for us to have this conversation, for your followers to have, your clients, everybody. Can you let us know where we can check you out and what day your podcast typically drop? We were telling our listeners how you have our Diagnonsense, brilliant name. What day does it drop?
Oh God, I'm so bad with my podcast. But
Are
also,
you okay?
you are
Well,
fab. Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed this. Um, I, I've been so bad
it
with
drops
it.
whenever,
I need someone
periodically.
to help me with it. It drops
We'll
usually
help you.
Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, maybe a Monday. So
Yeah,
We
bad.
like
love
it's a
it, honey. We're
surprise. You
busy.
wake up
Yeah,
and you have a
it's on
beautiful
my
surprise.
list. It's once a week.
We're busy.
It's
Yeah.
our diagnosis. I
Listen,
talk to other therapists and coaches about how they've gone through their own
Yeah,
personal challenges and what they do.
it's great.
amazing.
Um,
And you guys can check out How to Love Someone Without Losing Your
yeah, I read
Mind,
that.
which is a book that Todd wrote. Michaela read it this weekend. I'm gonna read it. I have two little babies, and I'm like, I want to sit and read a book, but I will. I'm going
I have
to.
a lot of
And I
babies.
cannot wait.
It's a
And
binge.
also check out your online course.
Yeah.
And where can we follow you
Yeah, you
at?
can find me on Instagram at your diagnonsense.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Todd, for
Awesome.
coming on and chatting with
Yeah, it's
us.
great.
Thank you guys so much for listening. You can catch a new episode of Model Citizen every Thursday. And please don't forget to follow the podcast so you don't miss any of the action. We want to hear from you. So please leave a rating and review and follow us on socials for all the behind the scenes action at Hunter McGrady and Michaela McGrady. And don't forget, you are worthy, you are loved, and you are capable of doing all wonderful things. Bye, guys.